I'm investigative journalist Molly Barrows. For years, I've covered the stories that made headlines in Northwest Florida and all along the Gulf Coast. Murders, missing persons, and mysteries of all kinds. These cases are far from over for many victims because the full story has yet to surface. Join me for Gulf Coast Confidential, where I dive into the saltier side of the South and expose the lies, greed, and corruption that often weighs down the truth. It's time to turn the tide and get a shot at justice. Hey, y'all, I'm Molly Barrows, and welcome to the Gulf Coast Confidential podcast, where we cover some pretty scandalous crimes and cases that bubble up here in Northwest Florida and well beyond. Joining me, as always, to talk about these what the feezy cases is Pam Hill, pharmacist, victim's advocate. She's experienced violent crime in her own family, so as you know, she brings a unique perspective to a lot of these cases that we cover. And today, we're covering one that if you follow Gulf Coast Confidential closely, then you know this one very well. This is an update to the Dr. Ben Brown case, Beauty Buyer Beware 7. Last time we talked about Ben Brown, we were talking about his arraignment coming up on July 11th. So I want to update you that he waived arraignment and he entered a written plea of not guilty. Now, if you remember, Dr. Ben Brown is the Gulf Breeze plastic surgeon charged with negligent manslaughter in the death of his wife, Hillary. That happened at his office, Restore Plastic Surgery in the Tiger Point area. She died after he performed several surgeries on her in that office, and it has just resulted in a cascading effect. We have numerous patients that have since come forward and says that they were the alleged victims of botched surgeries, which he denies. You have the Florida Department of Health also stepping in, restricting his license and an emergency license. So just a few things that we want to update you in this quick episode about Dr. Ben Brown. And he's also got a new celebrity attorney, Pam.
Yeah, a little fancy pants attorney. I think you've met him before, haven't you?
Yes, that's right. Mark O'Mara. I was surprised when I saw that. I thought, well, for a couple of reasons. One, I have met Mark O'Mara before when I worked for a personal injury attorney in a previous life, a personal injury firm, and they would have conferences in Vegas a couple of times a year. And during one of those conferences, we all had dinner, a large table of people. And I was seated next to F. Lee Bailey.
Wait, who?
It was outstanding. F. Lee Bailey.
He's always good for a joke or two.
Really enjoyed him. I know. God rest his soul. He passed a couple of years back, but he was there. He was. We were sitting next to each other, and we were across from Mark O'Mara and his wife. And for those who aren't familiar, Mark O'Mara represented George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin trial. So Trayvon Martin was the 17-year-old in Florida who was shot and killed by wannabe security guard George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman pleaded not guilty, said that he was in fear for his own life, even though Trayvon Martin was unarmed. He was following that teenager and thought that he felt suspicious and basically inserted himself in that position. And he ended up being charged with second-degree murder and negligent manslaughter. But Mark O'Mara got him off. So
And the Trayvon, he just had a little pack of Skittles and whatever those big drinks are, those watermelon kind of drinks.
Yes.
And, that you get at the grocery store that I like so much. I can't remember what it's called, but just that drink and some Skittles were in his hand.
Yes, that was such a sad case. And I remember talking to Mark O'Mara about that case. And obviously he felt the same way, but it was a big win for him. And as much as it was a national case, there was a big spotlight on that. And he won. And I think a lot of folks were surprised that George Zimmerman would get off from those charges.
I think he was surprised.
Yes.
Really, because I watched that trial a long time ago, not in the vein that I watch them now, but I remember thinking, wow, did this just happen?
Right, I know. And it's not even been a month since Ben Brown was arrested and charged in connection with his wife's death. And he had two local Pensacola attorneys, Jason Cromie and Barry Barossett, both experienced. And certainly Barry's older than Jason. He's been around a long time, but he's well known, one of the top criminal attorneys in Pensacola. Jason is also well respected. But Ben Brown has now said that they are no longer representing him, that it is going to be Mark O'Mara. And not only was I surprised that it's Mark, but also because Mark's, you know, he's high profile. Right. This is going to be a big legal bill, I would imagine,
right.
For someone who has filed for bankruptcy protection, who has numerous creditors coming after them. It just surprised me. How do you afford this? And I mean, imagine maybe he has family with pockets as well, but still, it just was surprising.
Maybe, but still, it just seems inappropriate because especially after you've been selling your deceased wife's ski boots on Facebook.
I know. A lot of Facebook posts of recent too, and you can check out some of our latest episodes of Beauty Buyer Beware for more on some of Ben Brown's alleged postings on social media, which have certainly drawn a lot of attention too. But a couple of the things that we want to recap for you. He also pled not guilty to the felony charge of negligent manslaughter, and he's demanding a jury trial. And then along with notifying the court that he has a new attorney, the clerk of court then reissued a notice to appear for his next court date. So that's going to be September 3rd. And in fact, the clerk said, if you don't appear on docket day for your next court date, Dr. Brown, you will be arrested and your bail bond forfeited, because he was out on $50,000 bail or bond rather at the time that he was arrested.
I was looking at that and I read that and I saw the word capious and I said, well, let me look this up because I'm not familiar with that one. Plenty of other legal things from having to read things on my own sister's case. And it's basically, you are going to show up or else we will get you here.
Right. I know. And I think that was something for folks who aren't familiar with the criminal justice system. There's so much that's new from the get-go, and I know you can relate to that.
Yes.
And in talking to Marty Ellington, Hillary Brown's father, I know Marty and his wife, Dixie, of course, are just devastated by this because aside from the loss of their daughter, they do believe that Ben Brown was negligent and that she would still be alive had he done his job properly and taken better care of her. And so their feelings are, why didn't he stay behind bars? Why was he only given $50,000 bond? Because that's $5,000 making bail. And they feel like that it's just not fair. And in talking to them, because it's certainly not my first time talking to people who are diving into the criminal justice system for the first time, it will be the first of many things that will surprise you, the first of many things that may potentially frustrate you.
Right. And it is our system, and it is hard when, hopefully you're not the defendant, because really we can't, he does have the presumption of innocence.
Absolutely, yes.
And so, but we're not out here to litigate the case out in the streets. They said he was a first-time offender and he has a house here and all those kind of things. I feel the same way as they feel. But that sometimes that's like, well, he did this. We're not doing this on the courthouse steps. And I've done that myself, So it's hard. It's just another indignity, that the family has to suffer. I go further back than that and go, wait a minute. These employees and these patients have been complaining to our state Department of Health. Why wasn't his behavior was weird? Even if he was the most excellent physician in the world, excellent surgeon in the world, his behavior has been behavior that is bizarre, unexplainable, unacceptable. We went through all those uns before on another episode. Unprofessional. It's not healthy for the patient. And every time somebody complained on him, they got shut down.
Yes, either the Department of Health didn't respond or they found the process of filing a complaint too cumbersome and difficult to be heard. But to your point, a lot of things did actually end up getting before the Department of Health, because after Hillary passed, numerous patients stepped forward to share their stories. I reported on it for the Pensacola News Journal. We've talked about it here on Gulf Coast Confidential. And sure enough, the Department of Health also interviewed several of the alleged victims and patients that I also talked to. And by alleged victim, they certainly were patients. That's been vetted and verified. But when you talk about some of the bizarre behavior, so many of these patients, not just the ones that the Department of Health also interviewed, but in the file that I have, say very similar things. That initially when they met him, very charming, very knowledgeable, came highly recommended. And I've also talked to patients who've had great experiences with him and didn't have any problems at all and are thankful for the work that he did do for them. But the ones that didn't have those good outcomes, there were definitely some familiar themes. You had some that were receiving unauthorized Brazilian butt lifts. That's additional fat being injected into your butt. And it's essentially one of the most dangerous surgeries that you can perform in plastic surgery. You had ones that had poor follow-up when it came to wound care. Their tummy tucks reopened and they had infections and necrosis and just repeated patterns of problems. And his response was very similar, according to these alleged victims that I spoke with, in that he would give them poor advice on how to follow up, would tell them that it was their bodies that were at fault. And it was just this blame game of, and while they sat there and suffered, essentially.
Eat more protein, drink more water, quit worrying. And then all the other things that came up, this bowl right here, or the lidocaine that was just straight in there, and then use it pull it up in a syringe and put it right in her face. The 911 call, I can't find my stethoscope. Wound care, from what I've read, and I have read so much of these reports and orders and the people that have talked to you, this whole book right here is struggling with wound care. After this lady, this is her journal.
Yes.
Yeah. After she had her mastectomy, so it's just, it's there. I don't know what else these folks needed to do. So there's a level of frustration, but here we are now. We're in the system. But the saddest thing, why did Hillary have to die for us to get here?
I know, and maybe we'll get more answers when it actually comes out in trial. I know the Florida Department of Health also investigated. That was one of the basis why they issued that emergency order restricting his license to just only being able to perform surgeries or practice in a state licensed facility under the supervision of a state licensed doctor. Basically, in their report, which you have here, they list all of the reasons why they felt like that emergency order needed to be enacted. And over and over again, they basically say he failed to follow the basic standard of care, whether it was giving the unauthorized BBLs, whether it was improperly keeping up with paperwork. But one of the biggest things that they dinged him on was not calling 911 and not immediately performing CPR on his wife as she went into cardiac arrest during these procedures that he was performing on her in his office last November. And the staff that was there, not all of them were trained, and certainly not to the level that they needed to be for the kind of performing surgeries he was performing on her. So according to this report, when she had taken a handful of pills, had also prepared her own anesthesia solution. And then when he ran out of that, this bowl that Pam has here, he filled up a bowl of lidocaine and began injecting that into her. So there was like a procedure on her stomach, on her arms, and as well as her face. And by the time he was getting to her face and he was injecting lidocaine into her face is when they said that she was, even before then, she had started to twitch, started to see orange, I believe, at that point. But yet he continued, according to the Department of Health's report right here. And that was when she basically went into cardiac arrest. And but to your point, he did not immediately call 911, and that is what the Department of Health, that is what the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office said, that he's not safe for future patients necessarily, and it's why he's being charged with negligent manslaughter in the death of his wife, because he didn't have the proper life-saving equipment on hand. He didn't follow basic standard medical care according to both the Department of Health and the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office, and he didn't call 911. But when that 911 call was finally made by someone in the office with him, it was, according to them, 10 to 20 minutes after her heart stopped. And we have a copy of that 911 call. And just to give you a feel for what it was like, we're going to go ahead and play for that call for you right now. It's as an edited, redacted version. So we're just playing a portion of it for you that you can actually follow. And there's not these long noises where they're blocking out additional information. But we want to go ahead and play for you that 911 call so you can get a feel for just what it was like in that office that afternoon.
Okay, are you there with the patient now?
Yes.
Okay, we do have help on the way. What exactly happened?
She was having surgery. This is a plastic surgery office. And she's unstable. She's having seizures.
Okay, and what kind of procedure was she being operated on for?
There was multiple ones.
Okay, can you tell me what they were?
She's in cardiac arrest right now.
Okay, we have help coming. Okay, can you tell me what kind of operation she was getting?
Abdominal lipo, fat transfer, different things. I don't know them off the top of my head right now.
Okay, sweetie, we have help on the way. They're coming emergency response, okay? If you'll just make sure that they have the AED attached to the patient and have it ready to go as well, and tell them to keep up with the chest compressions, okay?
Okay.
All right, if anything changes, call us back. The help's on the way.
Pam, what are your thoughts when you hear that call?
I hear panic, and I hear a basically a young woman that's terrified and she's doing the right thing, and I hear him in the background screaming like a maniac instead of, why didn't he get on the phone? He knows all the particulars. He's not finding a stethoscope or oxygen or anything else. He did not want to make that call. And I figure sometimes if you're a physician or something like that, you probably want someone else to make it, because basically they can probably say, hey, I'm a good Samaritan, you know?
Yes. And I know, I think about being a kid in school, the first thing they tell you is to teach you how to call 911.
Yeah. I mean, it's default. It's default. We see these things all the time on TV where the 3-year-old stumbles to the phone and 911 because we've taught them. If you're a physician, that's the first thing you need to know, because you aren't going to get it right every time. Somebody might need help.
Right. And the fact that the employees were asking, should we call 911? And one of the employees did immediately begin performing CPR, but I believe she was, and according to her, the only one.
Well, and I don't think you should have to ask to call 911. And it's been said that there were nurses in there. I can tell you there were not nurses in there.
No.
Because A, they would know how to do CPR, and before that is they would call 911. They're not going to ask you. Try to keep a nurse from calling 911.
I know. You're
Not gonna
absolutely
happen.
right. They know better than that for sure. Well, September 3rd is when his next court date is. It's docket day. And just as a reminder, Brown always has denied allegations of wrongdoing, even though he has not responded to our requests for interviews to appear here on Gulf Coast Confidential or responded to requests for interviews when I've covered him for the Pensacola News Journal. He does actually issue statements through his crisis management PR firm, Red Banyan. So here's the statement from Red Banyan. Ben continues to deny allegations of wrongdoing, and here's their statement, quote, Ben continues to mourn the death of his loving wife, Hillary, and this arrest, which is completely without merit, only deepens his pain and grief. All safety and medical protocols were strictly followed on the day of Hillary's passing. Ben is a conscientious, dedicated, and incredibly talented surgeon, and he is looking forward to presenting the actual facts in a court of law and clearing his name of this horrible accusation. End quote. So we want to be sure to let folks know, obviously, innocent until proven guilty. He has not been tried in a court of law yet. And it's not just the criminal front that he has an attorney. He also has counsel defending him against these allegations from the Florida Department of Health, who is asking for the Board of Medicine to penalize him. Now, from what I understand, a hearing date has not been set yet. When that administrative order was sent to the Board of Medicine by the Department of Health asking for penalties, it gave a whole array of options, everything from losing his license, right, to just going to what sounded like
CE.
Community service, right? Yeah.
Or continuing education.
Refresher course on how to call 911, I guess.
Yeah, well, it needs to go. That would be a good one. Go there. I mean, I still can't get over that. What are we, like number 7 now? Ben Brown 7? All right. Those weirdo photos, getting these fancy pants attorneys and firing this bunch that was already here quite capable and saying, selling things on Facebook and just all this stuff. It's just so crazy. I'm looking forward to court too.
Yes, absolutely. Can't wait to see what both sides present. Well, Pam, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
That's it for Beauty Buyer Beware, Episode 7, the Dr. Ben Brown case. We appreciate you being on Gulf Coast Confidential. I'm your host, writer, and producer, Molly Barrows, with co-host and researcher Pam Hill. And a big thanks to director, editor, and production engineer James Roy, as always. And you can listen to more of our Gulf Coast Confidential conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You can also watch on the Gulf Coast Confidential YouTube channel. Just don't forget to like and subscribe, y'all. All right, we'll see you next time.